Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live presentation titled OPC Alarms and Conditions, where we explain how to collect and use OPC UA alarms and conditions, also known as OPC UA A&C. My name is Randy, and I am the presenter today. In this webinar, we will be talking about the problem we need to solve. Then we'll talk about OPC UA alarms and conditions. We'll talk about their requirements and how OPC Expert very specifically handles alarms and conditions. I'll show you the architecture. And finally, I'll show you a live alarms and conditions example. At the end, I'll tell you how to get a copy of this webinar recording. Well, we're going to email it to you. And you will also get a link for some quick setup videos. So, what's the problem we're trying to solve? OPC servers have many system alarms and conditions and events they generate. As well, human machine interfaces and historians have to access these alarms, conditions, and events. They've got to capture these alarms, conditions, and events, and they have to deal with this structured data. And users want to manage these alarms and conditions. And what I mean by that is they want to be able to view them. They want to be able to act on them and acknowledge them. They want to be archived. They want to be able to archive or store them in a database somewhere. And they for sure want to be able to analyze the information. So when we have our control system, the question is, how exactly are we going to get the alarms and conditions and events? So that's the problem. Now, let me show you where we're going. So here we have a controller. It can be, of course, any controller. We have the software right here, OPC Expert. The data is being sent from the controller to OPC Expert via an OPC server. Now, this could be OPC UA or OPC Classic, OPC real-time data, so DA, or it can be OPC alarms and conditions, or OPC alarms events, and so on. It doesn't really matter. Data is being sent via OPC to OPC Expert. We're then going to take that data and we'll send it to a remote computer where there's a database running. And at the end, we're going to view the data in a browser. So the first thing we're going to do is view the real-time alarms and conditions right here in OPC Expert. Then we're going to capture these alarms and conditions and send them to a remote database. In this case, we're going to be using Microsoft SQL Server. And then we will view the historical alarms and conditions. So you will see what was actually captured here, and we can verify, yes, it really was captured. Yes, it really is growing. Then we're going to go up here and send the data to the browser, where we're going to view the real-time alarms and conditions again, but this time through the browser. And we're going to configure the alarms and conditions right here through the browser. Now, keep in mind, because it's in a browser, it also means by extension that you can connect to here via a browser on a different PC, and more than that, by a phone or a tablet. So you'll see the web interface for this, and you will actually be able to try this yourself as well. I'll give you a link to download it, and you can actually download and give this a try yourself. So with this in mind, let's get going. And I'll have this slide again to give a map of where we're going. Keep in mind, the communication here, we're going to grab alarms and conditions. We're then going to send that data to the database. So there's a store and forward mechanism I'll mention later on. And this to the browser is done via a web service. Let's have a look at what's going on. So the challenge we have is we've got an OPC server and we've got a client application that needs that data. So event producers. So these event producers would be PLCs, there would be DCSs, there would be RTUs, some kind typically of a control system, might actually be an HMI or a historian too, but typically it's these. They produce real-time data. So they produce information on temperatures, flows, pressures, currents, and so on. So they produce a lot of real-time data, and they sometimes create their own events. So they sometimes create their own alarms, conditions, and events, but not always. Sometimes you have to create them yourself. And sometimes you have proprietary tools to take a look at these alarms, conditions, and events, but not always. So that's down here with the producers. The consumers, which are typically human machine interfaces or historians, they are the consumers. They consume this data. As I said earlier, these guys can also create their own alarms, conditions, and events, but typically they're the consumers. And they usually have their own proprietary tools to view this data. They also, like I said, create their own events from real-time data. And they don't typically consume structured data, which means they typically don't connect to a remote OPC alarms and conditions server. They usually take real-time data and make their own events, but usually they don't consume ready-made alarms, conditions, and events. Users, really what they want to do is consolidate all of the data. So whatever system it comes from might come from 10 different systems, but they want to put it all in one system. They want to be able to consume the structured data as well, which means that if I've got structured data right over here, an alarm made here, really, I want to be able to consume it as it is. I don't want to create my own. So this is the challenge we have. We have producers that are producing sometimes structured events. We've got and alarms. We've got consumers, consumer applications that are very often unable to do something with this data. And the users, of course, want to put everything together. So let's talk about this gateway. And in previous webinars, I already talked to you about OPC to MQTT. I talked about OPC to Excel, tunneling web pages, and I also introduced the concept of the security gateway. So in this case, we're talking about the alarm gateway. So it's a gateway and provides the ability to consolidate your data, to take multiple different data sources and put them all into one. It's all completely standards based, meaning OPC in and OPC out. It can create structured data, so it can create its own alarms, conditions, and events, and it enables you to consume structured data as well. So it doesn't change the structure of the data that it gets in here. If it gets an alarm, it can actually send that to the database just as that alarm. Now, very specifically, this OPC Expert Alarm Gateway, it connects to the OPC server. It uses the security that comes with that OPC server, whether it be OPC security or Windows security. It can send data out using OPC security or Windows security. It can add its own. And that's the purpose. That's the reason we talked about the security gateway in the previous webinar. Now, on the server side, so what we're talking about is the server side. If this is the client, this is the server side. You can run it on Windows XP all the way to Windows 11 or Windows 2003, Windows Server 2003, all the way to Windows Server 2025. In other words, from the oldest to the newest. And there's support built in for OPC UA and also for OPC Classic. And this thing runs as a Windows server. And what that means is that as soon as you boot up your computer, it will always be running. It starts with Windows, and nobody needs to be logged on. You don't need an automatic log on. It will run as a service and start consuming the data or sending it to wherever it is you need as soon as that computer starts. And all of this is done automatically. And this enables it to manage OPC server data collection and also even acknowledgements. If somebody is acknowledging, if you have a user acknowledging, it will send that acknowledgement. You can do that as well. And all of this is done via one port. It's only one port that's needed for all of this. So one port coming in, one port going out. So it's quite easy to manage from a firewall perspective and also from a security perspective. It's pretty neat, actually. Now, keep in mind, all this time I was showing you OPC Expert right here as a black box, meaning we don't know what's inside it. We don't know what the modules are that are inside. So let's take a look and make it a white box. We'll shine a light on it and see what's going on in here. So this slide here, we're talking about what's inside OPC Expert. So these are the modules that you get inside OPC Expert. And we begin with an alarms and with alarms, conditions, events client right inside OPC Expert, and that sends data to OPC Expert's intelligent engine, which can then send the data out via a web server or an OPC UA server. But there's more, because you can also bring in OPC DA, OPC UA, and you can send out the data via OPC DA as well. So inside, what you see right here is a built-in converter. You can convert from DA to UA, from alarms and events maybe to OPC UA, alarms and conditions, from UA to DA, UA to web server. So all of these conversions are inherent to the software itself. There's more. OPC Expert also includes an MQTT broker if that's what you need. Now, keep in mind these modules are not necessarily just for alarms and conditions, that you can use it for other things. I'm just showing you other modules that are in here. There's a built-in MQTT broker, as well as an MQTT publisher and subscriber. So you can see you can take in MQTT and send out OPC UA, or bring in UA or DA and send out MQTT, or just have that in a broker for somebody else. You can also send data to a database. So for example, maybe you want to send your database to SQL, like MySQL or Microsoft SQL, or maybe you want to send it to the web, to Amazon or to Microsoft Azure, or maybe you just want to store it locally in a CSV. So all of that is possible, and all of these modules are included. You can also consume data with OPC history, so OPC UA or OPC Classic, OPC Historical Data Access, HDA, or even send the data out to Excel via the RTD that's available. So as I said, all of these modules are included inside OPC Expert. And in this webinar, very specifically, we're focusing on these modules right here. So here we've got SQL, there's the web server, there's the alarms client, and of course the UA server. And I'll show you all of those as we move along. So having seen this, one more architecture diagram, because as I said, we have OPC servers, they can send data to OPC Expert. Now get this. From here, if you have a UA client running on some platform, then you can just connect to OPC Expert via UA. But if you have a DA client, you can take this UA data, convert it to UA, and now you can see a local UA client. That's how the tunneling works, as an example. So you can get that built in. It's baked into the architecture. Now, maybe what you have as well is a mobile app. So if you've got a mobile app, then you'd connect via a web service, OPC Expert's web service, which we will actually show here. So this web service really enables you very, very easily to either connect to a mobile app or to a browser running on a phone or a tablet, whatever platform you've got, whether it's iPhone or whether it's Android, whatever it is you want. And of course, there is Python or JavaScript, for example, if you got whatever scripting language, or C, C++, whatever you have running, or maybe a Unix variant, Linux, or something else, doesn't matter. You can get all that stuff via web services into your applications quite easily. So if you're running a platform other than Windows, you can still get access to all of this data. Okay, so having seen all this, let's get to the actual demonstration we're going to do. So in this case, as I said, we have a controller. Well, we're actually simulating a controller. There is OPC Expert right over here, and we're going to grab data from this controller via an OPC server. So we will actually begin with an alarm and condition server right over here. We'll take that data, we're going to view it here, then we're going to send it to a remote database, and I'll show you that. Then we're going to take that data and we're going to put it in a browser, and we're going to see it and see what we can do. So first thing, we're going to view it right inside OPC Expert. Then we're going to take that data and send it to a remote database where I will show you how to view the historical data. And then we're going to go up here, and with web services, we're going to view the real-time data with OPC alarms and conditions. And I will even show you how to configure these alarms and conditions. We'll also see some services, which are pretty cool. So let's go and get this done. Keep in mind, this server we're going to connect to, this will be the OPC Foundation server. And anybody that wants access to any of this software, just let me know and we can send you links. So this will be just directly to OPC alarms and conditions. We're then going to send the data over to SQL. And this is going to be done via a web service. And you will actually see what these are like. I will come back to this picture as I show you what's going on. So let's go to this computer right over here. So there is the computer. So you can see remote desktop is in here, and I'll make this bigger right away, but that's the computer that we're on. That's where OPC Expert is going to be running. So you can see Task Manager here, and you can see there's no OPC Expert running here. So I'm just going to start up OPC Expert. It's going to get set up. Now, this Quick Starts Alarms Conditions server, this is the OPC server we're going to be connecting to. We're also going to be connecting to a Kepware server. There it is right over here. So we'll be connecting to that server as well. So we've got this server to the Kepware server. We've got this Quick Starts Alarms and Conditions server. This will be a DA server. This will be an alarms and conditions server. So once again, OPC Expert here. And one moment, there's what we're looking at. And again, we're looking at this computer right here. We're also going to be looking at this computer over here. And let me show you that right away. Bear with me. So the computer running Microsoft SQL, that's right over here. There's the Microsoft SQL computer right over here, where we have Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. So SQL Server Management Studio right over here. And just to show you, there is nothing here. We're not sending anything. Nothing is set up. And even when I refresh it, you can see there's absolutely nothing here. All right. So let's get back to and we will come back here. We will see that we're sending data over here. And here is OPC Expert. We can see it's starting up. There we go. And I will browse. Let me just give more room. I will browse my PC and look for OPC servers. And what we find are 4 OPC Classic servers. Those are the ones in the blue. So we see 4 OPC Classic servers, 3 OPC UA servers. There's a Kepware UA server. There is the Quick Starts, and this is the OPC Expert UA server. So this is a server where we're going to get alarms and conditions. So from here, I just connect to it, which I just did, and I right-click OPC UA alarms and conditions, and I'll start with monitoring the alarms and conditions, and we'll see what we have coming here, what we have available. And as you can see, we have a whole bunch of information coming from the server. And we can see the severity changes, the type, what these are, not so important right now, but we can see a whole bunch of conditions. I can acknowledge any one of these things. So I can do a whole bunch of things from the viewer. This is right inside OPC Expert. And by the way, there is OPC Expert executable right over here. And that's this thing. Then we have OPC Expert System Tray. That's the system tray right down here. It's a little helper application. Okay, so we can see that we really are getting the alarms and conditions from the UA server. But now what I want to do is actually send it to Microsoft SQL. So remember, Microsoft SQL is running over here. And of course, we still have nothing because we didn't send anything. So what I will do is right click OPC UA alarms and conditions, and this time we will archive OPC UA A&C. You can see I could send it to Amazon or to a CSV or to Azure or to Microsoft SQL or maybe Mongo to MQTT. I have a whole bunch, and there are even more than you can see here. We can get to with other options, but we're just going to send it to Microsoft SQL Server. And Microsoft SQL Server is on a computer called SQL-DB. So I go SQL-DB, and I will even test my connection because I want to make sure that I entered it right, and I successfully connected. Good. So now I know this is going to work. So when I click OK, what I can see is OPC Expert is setting up the archive. So keep in mind, SQL Server is running on a different PC. So it's running right over here behind. And as soon as it starts, you can see it starting, you can see it in real time. There it is, it's starting and it's sending data. Now, what might be confusing a little bit is in here, we see a whole bunch of alarms and conditions. Here we only see one item, and that's because it's one data source. So if, for example, I'm going to be connecting to 5 different OPC alarms and condition servers, I'll see 5 lines over here, one for each data source. Okay, so let's go over to SQL. There we are. And here, I'll just expand this so it takes the full screen. And now when we refresh, we can see there's the history database, and you can, of course, rename all these things quite easily. And inside it, we see a bunch of tables. And there's historical data, A&C. We looked at other tables in other webinars, and we can refer to those later on. But there's historical data, A&C, and I will select the top 1,000 rows. And what I can see is 233 rows. And now 257. So we're acquiring new data, 263 rows. Now, just to make it a little bit more interesting, I will scroll down a little bit. So there we go. I will take this time. I will cut it. We'll scroll back up. I'll paste it over here. Doesn't have to be particularly nice. And I will do this order by time, and we'll make a descending order. And during all this time, I see last time was 263 rows. And while I was doing this, we already collected. We've got 385 rows. So we got over 100 events during that time. And now you can see the time, and you can see all the different fields that are available. So OPC Expert actually takes a structured event and then breaks it apart into its individual components. So it's still here. So there's one alarm per row, one alarm and condition per row, and anything new just keeps coming in here. So for example, I can execute again, take a look at the time. So you can see 27 seconds, and I will execute again. And now I'm at 34 seconds, and you can see the number of rows is 517 and 527 rows, and it's now 39 seconds. So it's clearly increasing in size. And all of this, like I said, is available for you in Microsoft SQL in this case. But you can put it in MySQL or Mongo or Azure or wherever it is you want. Okay, so now we're seeing this data is coming here. And as I said, I can, of course, run it as a service too, so it starts automatically with Windows. Okay, so I could do that. I'm not going to bother with it right now. What I want to do is, let me set up, and I will show you. In fact, uh, okay, so we did one, which is we viewed the real time, store and forward, and you can see this SQL server. And now we're going to go in here. But to do that, I need to set up my web service. So let's go do that. So to set up the web service, I go to Tools, Servers and Services, and Web Server is right down here. And I click OK. What this does, and take a look over here, is it sets up my web services. For example, right now you can see it's starting up OPC Expert UA server. So it's starting it up. There it is. And you can see it's running as a system account, and that's because it is a service. And we can see the web server is right over here, also running as a service. In fact, I can take a look at them. And let's go. There they are. There's OPC Expert UA server running as a service, and OPC Expert web server also running as a service. And so 5428 is the process ID, 5428. So you can see it really is the same one, nicely labeled. OPC Expert UA server, OPC Expert web server. So pay attention now when I close this. So I'm closing OPC Expert GUI, and it's gone. Now these services keep on running. And there's that system tray right over here, but you don't need that going. So to see what's going on, let's go into the browser. So there's a built-in HMI right inside OPC Expert. So you can see it's loading up the HMI, so you can actually do things if you want. You can set up your visualization. Really, really neat stuff here. And I will run it. There we go. So we can see, for example, there's my instrument. You can see the instrument is going up and down. There's the temperature and the level. Okay, let me make it a little bit smaller right down here. And let's go into alarms and conditions, which is just another tab. And I hope you're appreciating this. What's going on is these are just tabs inside Chrome. So of course you can see this on Edge or whatever it is you want. So there you go. So here is the real-time data, and here we're just making events. And the data here is actually coming, the back end is going to a Kepware server, as I said. So watch, if, for example, I go to instrument and I move it, take a look, there's the instrument alarm, it's at a high, now it's inactive, right? So we can, for example, acknowledge this, and because it's inactive, I acknowledged it. Right, so now that's gone. But if I once again go up here, oh, look at this, I'm getting my events. And if we take a look at the level as an example, you can see that the level, watch this, as the level climbs higher and higher and higher, all of a sudden, oop, we got a high right over here. And we can actually see the current value as well in here. All right, so you can see the current values and what caused it to go into an alarm condition, which is it reached 40,000. Okay, now of course I can acknowledge it. If I acknowledge it, so I did something, So I acknowledged it. Um, it doesn't disappear because it didn't go inactive, but as soon as it goes inactive, you'll see that it disappears, and there it is, it's gone, because it's acknowledged and inactive. So just like that. So there we can see that we are getting these events. Now, in order to alarms, and in order to be able to configure these, in order to be able to configure, all I do is there's the viewer that I'm in the viewer right now, see the viewer, and I'll go to configuration. Now I'm in configuration, and I'm going to go into a different area here. So I'll go into root and into PLC, and there's my level alarm. Now, I'll just make this big so you can see it better. Okay, so there's my level alarm. There's some information about it, and I can edit it to make some changes. So for example, you can see that the high right now is at 40,000, but no, that's not good enough for me. I want to make it at 30,000. And I want to make the high at, let me make it at 28,000. Fine. And I'll make the low at 10,000. And I'll make the deadband 100. And I'll make the low at 5,000. And I'll make the deadband at 100. There we go. And I can apply these changes. So now that I've applied it, if we go back and I edit it, you can see that all of those changes took effect. And by the way, you can see that the source node is actually coming from the Kepware server. So this is actually connecting to a DA server and making its own alarms and conditions. And why? Because the server itself didn't have its own alarms and conditions. And now, when we go back to our viewer, this is going to be set to whatever it is the new system is asking for. So in fact, I will go like this. And remember, these guys are running as a service. So even when I kill this, I'm going to kill it. See that? I killed them. Everything is killed. And it restarts. Why does it restart? Because Windows is restarting them automatically because they are services. That's one of the benefits of being a server. We'll come back to this after the questions, during the question and answer time. So there we go. There is the computer we were looking at. So the computer we were looking at right here. So what I showed you was real-time alarms and conditions right here. We saw that in OPC Expert. I showed you how to archive and put it into Microsoft SQL Server. We even viewed the historical alarms and conditions. And we were able to view these alarms in the browser as well as configure the alarms and conditions. So we were able to do all of this. And that's what we were able to do throughout all this time. So if you download OPC Expert, you can actually try this yourself. You have a guide now of what I just did, and you can actually do it yourself. Let me just say a few more words. This is the end of the end of the demo. Let me just say a few more words for the people that pay my bills on the training side, and then I'll get back to your questions that you were asking about a little bit earlier. So we will go back to those questions. So bear with me. To get automated troubleshooting, you can download OPC Rescue, you can download OPC Expert, you'll be able to do all this stuff that I just showed you. If you download OPC Expert, you'll be able to trend into bridge, into tunnel, and we have separate webinars on all of these things on our website. If anything is particularly interesting, we have webinars on all of these. In this particular webinar, we talked about OPC to web, we talked about archiving, and we talked very specifically about OPC alarms and conditions. I also showed you a little bit about getting data from DA and making your own alarms and conditions from it. So one of the cool things is you can use OPC Expert to convert OPC DA to alarms and conditions. You can actually even take OPC alarms and conditions and convert it to DA. Kind of cool, actually. Okay, so from here, if you want to learn more, just come to one of our hands-on training sessions where you earn your certified OPC professional designation. In these classes, these workshops, you configure DCOM and OPC UA, you configure the security, you do all of this stuff. You get a couple of computers, so one computer for the client, one computer for the server, you control them, you are able to fix problems. So we give you problems, you fix them, and then once you fix them, we break them. So it's a back and forth, pretty neat stuff. You fix, we break, then you fix and we break. And in the end, you have a very, very good idea of how to configure OPC for communication and also for security, including firewalls and so on. So really, really neat stuff. Now, these classes are all live and they are remote. So live remote classes. There's a live instructor. They're very, very interactive. They're not recorded. And of course, there's no travel because they're remote. The classes are public, but we also have, if you've got enough people, we can do a private training session just for you. And if you wanted to, and of course, we go on site as well. For dates, just have a look at opcti.com. One last slide before I get to your questions. So we're going to send you an email with a link to this webinar recording. We'll also send you a link to be able to download OPC Expert, as well as examples to get OPC alarms and conditions. So you'll see how you can create them. If you have questions, give us a phone call or send us an email or just go visit our website.